Hey, friends. Can you guys see and hear me? Can you feel me? Is it happening? It's grade school. What's going on, everybody? Good to see y'all. Glad to be with you guys on this fine Monday morning. How in the heck are all of y'all? How are you guys feeling today? Let me know in the chat. I'm watching the chat. Don't think I'm not. Why am I watching the chat? Because I'm jealous. I wish I was up in that chat with you guys. It's good to see everybody. Who's in the house? Oh, man. Jeff's here. Cower's here. Matt, Kevin, Nicholas, James, John. Oh, man. We got a party going on here. PK's here. Amazing. Oh, Cower, you got the new office set up, dude. That's awesome. Congrats. Yeah, good to see everybody. It's going to be a good sesh today. Everyone, get your topics ready. What is on your mind in the world of color grading? What are you struggling with? What are you curious about? What are you trying out and not able to figure out? Get it ready. Drop it in the chat. Let me know. For the next hour, I am here for you guys. As many of you guys know, last week was a very big week for CKC and for many of us here in this room. We dropped my brand new plugin that I created in partnership with Dr. Mitch Bogdanowicz and Steve Yedlin ASC, Genesis. Very exciting. We had a lot of fun with it last week. This session, however, I want to go back to everything else in the world of color grading that doesn't revolve around Genesis. So we might take a question or two on Genesis if you guys have some really big ones, but for the most part, I want to go back to our regularly scheduled programming and just be here for you guys, serve you guys with whatever is on your mind, whatever questions you've got in the big, bad, wide world of color grading. So as you guys know, I can just talk. I can just start making stuff up. But before I start doing that, let me go to my buddy Raf, who's here with me. Do we have any questions yet in the chat?
We sure do. And we have this question from Rami Aikim. And he wants to know what's the workflow for generating a 3D lookup table for a camera that is not listed in the input of Genesis, in your Genesis OFX, like in the input side. Yeah, that's the question.
Okay, that's a cool one. I tell you what, I'm going to hope that you are a pro license holder. If you are a pro license holder, we're going to walk through that in just a couple days here when we do our workshop. I think that's a better place to do that because to really give you a full, thorough answer there, it's probably at least 10 minutes. So it's not particularly complex, but there are a couple of steps that you want to follow. So I'm going to push that off to our session this weekend, assuming you're a pro customer. Let us know in the chat if not, and maybe I'll reconsider that.
All right. In that case, we have a question from Ryan, and he wants to know how to open his shadows without losing the snap and the contrast in the rest of the image.
Oh, Ryan, a man after my own heart. I love this one. By the way, before I move off it, Raphael, would you just make a note for me that we actually should document how to export a LUT for a non-supported or for a camera space that is not listed in our inputs there? That's a great idea. All right.
Noted.
So, thank you, sir. Let's take a look at Ryan's question here. Should we look at Resolve? Should we get hands-on? Let's do it. Okay, can you guys see my screen? It looks like you can see my screen. Someone yell if you cannot see my screen. So here's the challenge, Ryan. Like, it's so funny. Like, I feel like everything kind of comes back to, like, you characterized it really well. I don't even remember the exact verbiage that you used, but you characterized it really well. How do we maintain contrast and snap in the middle, but soften out the bottom end? And it really comes down to, like, I'm going to give you guys, like, maybe a new lens to put on this thing. There's two considerations here. There is functionality and there's repeatability, okay? Good things to write down if you're taking notes on the stuff that I'm talking about today. This goes for pretty much anything, but when it comes to this specific talking point, how do I shape my shadows? How do I open up my shadows without losing contrast in the middle? There's two things we need to figure out. There's functionality and there's repeatability. We're going to start by talking about functionality. So functionality, the way we want to handle that, I'm going to do this here in my template node graph, and I'm going to consider this to be something that in a perfect world, maybe this would be highly repeatable and streamlined, and I could have tools for it that live right here in my prime node, which is where I usually set exposure, contrast ratio, tonal adjustments, right? But let's say for the moment, I don't have anything that fancy, and I just want to get a better sense of, like, what's just a way that works? What's the thing that we need to do? And then we can start to look at how do we make that thing as efficient and repeatable and accessible to my hands as possible. You guys tracking what I'm saying so far? I kind of want to bite this off in chunks. So because we're going to bite it off in chunks, we're going to start off here in node number 9. This is just where I do my additional color grading stuff that doesn't involve power windows, generally speaking. Okay. So our friend here for sure is going to be our custom curves. Again, this is kind of independent of like this is not a terrible tool to use as your final answer to the question, but it's not important really that this be your final tool or not. It's important that we understand what we need to accomplish using our custom curves. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to prepend a serial node at the very beginning of my node graph, and I'm going to go to my utilities power grades, and I'm going to grab this DaVinci wide gamut gray power grade. All this is, for anyone who's curious, it is my exposure chart. This is a free download. There will be a link to it in the description for today's video that lets you generate patches, one or more patches of middle gray in whatever your working space is. I'm working in DaVinci Intermediate, so that's perfect. And all I've done is drop my total steps down from their default, which is 13, down to 1, because that's all I care about, okay? So we're going to go now into node number 9. And here's the fun part, guys. I'm getting a map right now just from generating this like kind of single sad looking tooth right here. I've got a map of what Ryan is asking for. Like, what do we need to do? What we need to do is shape stuff out in here without losing the slope that I currently have in here. So like, if we just start to look at this visually, easy example of like, all right, open up shadows. I was going to do this. Okay. Pop quiz for you guys who are following along at home. I won't be able to stop to take the question or to check out y'all's answers, but answer to yourself. What am I doing right now? What is this the exact equivalent of in terms of other tools in Resolve, in terms of the basic tools that we first learned when we're grading? That's lift, right? All I'm doing is affecting lift. And you can see if I turn this grade chart back on, I'm not satisfying the mission right now because the area of the curve, which overlaps with my tooth, is changing in slope, right? Slope is literally like, I always think of it like a ski slope because I love to ski and wish I could ski more often. I think this is going to be a good year for it. I've got a 3-year-old and an almost 2-year-old, and I feel like it's just the right time to get him on some skis like my dad did with me. Anyway, I think about it as a ski slope. This is literally a shallower slope. Like it would be, I'll probably take my 3-year-old down more of a slope like this than a slope like that, right? So I'm failing my mission right now because I'm not exerting enough localized control, enough targeting. I'm moving the whole thing. I'm changing the slope. And in doing so, like that's a more sort of like narrow definition of what Ryan says when I don't want to lose that snap in the middle. That snap in the middle comes from the slope that we have right here, either holding or increasing. Okay. So what do we need to do? Well, we got to get down in here and shape some stuff out. So I've shown this to you guys before at different points in different forms, but here's one of the ways you can do it. The most simple one would be to think about like, all right, I just want to start to fill some things in, and I'm done with my DaVinci wide gamut gray now. And let's look at something that's got some kind of like chunky shadows. I don't know, like this is probably a good frame, right? Now, I'll emphasize that already I'm living under a really good look and I'm in a really good pipeline. So like this already, these shadows already have like some nice shape, and it's like, I feel like I can see even though I'm not like too fogged or like flat down there. But let's see if we can make it even better. This is a big part of what I do when I'm color grading. So let me just ripple over what we were starting to work on from over here. So I've got my anchored point here. And the easy first thing you can do is this right here. Like so. What am I doing there? I'm flattening things out in the bottom, but I'm making sure at least not to affect the slope at or above my middle gray point where I dropped that control earlier. And here's what's fun. You can hold down Option and move this left or right. And now you can start to constrain. Like it's really that transition point where you're like, okay, yes, open, 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 stop. You're now in the middle. You're now touching the area of the image that I want to feel snappy and contrasty, okay? So like this is a basic first move that you can make here. And there's pretty much anything, like this is now a range that you have here. There's all kinds of interesting stuff you can do down in here, like a million different ways that you can look at shaping out this portion of the image. You can, for example, there's no rule that says you have to leave this point pinned. Maybe you open up a little bit. Another one that I've shown you guys at various points, you can do some variation on what I call like a volume play, where I'm going to hold down Option and move this back to doing nothing. Let's actually do this. I'm just going to delete that point. Now I'm going to hold down Option and click and create a brand new point. Oh, that explains it. I'm holding down Command, which don't work the same way. So check this out. Now I've bisected. Here's middle gray, here's nothing, here's halfway in between the two. Check this out. Rainbow here, hammock here. And this is super easy to overdo. So much so that I've created a power grade for this because it takes a while to dial in for your first time. But once you do, you can drop it on here and dial it into taste. I've got that same vibe happening here. I've got it connected to my key output gain. Everybody familiar with key output gain? I know a bunch of you guys are, but if you're not, key output gain is rad. It's literally, if you've ever had a client telling you, hey, cut it in half, key output gain is what will allow you to literally cut it in half. So right now I've got this node at a key output gain of 0, which means it's doing nothing, right? Now, if I set it to 1, it's going to be too strong, especially for this shot. It's actually not terrible, to be honest, but still more than I would want to do. So what I can do now is I can feather it in to the image and just get that little bit. That's just one variation that you can do. But the point, like the larger theme here, is set an anchor point at or below your middle gray, and then start messing around down below there and trying to get something that you like on the screen. Now, again, I promised I would talk about this in 2 parts. I'm going to kind of leave a tease for the second part. But the first part is the most important. Functionality. Does it work? Is it clean? Is it repeatable? Okay, or is it clean, I should say. The second part then becomes repeatability. How can I make this something that's easy for me to do on every shot, right? We actually are now looking at one basic version of that. We're like, hey, this saved power grade where I can just adjust my key output gain. That's not too cumbersome, right? Definitely saves me from having to redraw this curve every single time. So that might be an answer to the question. You might end up using different tools to get at the same result. But fundamentally, when you are doing this well, when you're accomplishing Ryan's goal well, what you are doing is controlling slope or maintaining slope at the middle of the image and above. And then you are flattening out or shaping things out below that middle exposure point. Does that track with you guys? Hope that helps, Ryan.
Kind of a fun question here. And the question is, what are some of the most underrated tools, in your opinion, that Resolve has in terms of texture? Some of the tools that you think people don't use that much, but produce excellent results for texture specifically.
Oh, fun question. What are some of the most underrated tools in terms of texture? I feel like a couple might pop to mind if I think about that for a minute, but the first one that definitely comes to mind is noise reduction, but not noise reduction in the way you might normally use it. So let's find an image. I need to get some people with, like, there's I think I realized this in a recent grade school. There's really not a single face in this timeline that needs any sort of kind of beauty work. They're just all beautiful people. Let's pick on this detective here. Although your skin looks great too, detective. You're just the closest thing to someone who has any texture that I might want to remedy. So here's something that I really like to do. Now, first thing I'll note, within my template node graph, if you like my template node graph, if you use one similar, make sure you're not doing stuff like I'm about to do in a parallel node, because it's going to be not nice for your image. You want to do any kind of textural, spatial stuff in somewhere like I've got in node number 10 here. This is where I'm going to do it. So for beauty work and for cleanup, or not cleanup, beauty work specifically, for like dialing in texture, my first thing that I like to use is noise reduction. So we're going to go over here, and I like spatial over temporal because temporal can create artifacts very easily. And so like, I don't care. I'm not trying to reduce any noise right now, but if I like zoom way in here, this is probably going to be a stress test on the YouTube stream. But if I just do a little bit of this, and actually in this case, more than a little. Oh, I reset that. That's not what I wanted to do. So I'm going to go better with my mode, medium with my radius. I could even go large. And I'm going to go harder than is advisable, just so you guys can see it over Zoom. So this is too hard, okay? Like this is looking really plasticky, like we're starting to get into that uncanny valley, like, oh my God, is this AI generated type of vibe? But I'm doing it extremely because otherwise I'm not confident you guys are going to see it over a YouTube stream. But if we do this, and then like, you know, feather it back to someplace that's actually reasonable for our monitor, this is a great way of just slightly softening skin out. I actually like it more most of the time than mid-tone detail. Like if we do this versus mid-tone detail has more of a kind of gauzy thing that happens almost right off the bat. So you can see here's my noise reduction. There's my mid-tone detail. Noise reduction, mid-tone detail. It's similar in terms of the texture I'm achieving on his skin, but it's like getting kind of foggy and like really feeling soap opera-y almost as soon as I reach for it. So like that's one example that comes to mind is noise reduction. You can even do noise reduction in linear. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to go gamma linear. And that can give you an even nicer result that really feels pretty sneaky. Something like that. Okay. So that's the first one that comes to mind. Noise reduction for sure. The other one that I will go with, this is kind of a fun full circle for me. We talked about Genesis all last week. Genesis is an awesome tool. I'm super excited. If anyone hasn't gotten the chance to grab a trial of Genesis, go do it. It's free. Like, there's no harm in tasting it. Okay. But here's what I'm going to say. Genesis is a very premium plugin. It is not meant for every single user. It's not going to be right for every single colorist at every single point in their journey. It's going to be right for certain colorists who have certain needs and are at a certain career level. Okay. The other most underrated tool in Resolve to me is the stock film LUTs that come with Resolve. I think they can look really, really nice. So if we just explore that for a minute. So this is my, I'm working with Contour and I think OpenDRT here to go back to our DRT topic for a second. And I'm getting a really nice image out of it. But let me show you guys. Are you interested in this? You want to see how I do using how I would make best use of Resolve's Kodak 2383? I'm going to assume that everyone is right now jumping up and down violently in their chairs going, yes, 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 yes. Because you guys are on a time lag. You're technically in my future and I'm in your past, however you want to think about that. So check this out. Here's the way that I like to do it. I'm going to tee up for this using ACEs. This is like a 3-step process, okay? So we're going to go, I'm just going to build some nodes out here and I'll walk you through what I'm doing. So we're going to do a CST from our working space, DaVinci Wide Gamut, DaVinci Intermediate, ACES AP0, linear, tone mapping method, none. Okay. What's this doing? Or rather, what is this doing? It's just moving me into ACES. Okay. So we're moving into ACES linear. I'm going to label this as I go. We're now going to go into the ACES ADX10 standard. Okay. That was designed for this application of interchanging film materials with digital materials. Okay. So I'm moving from ACES, that's what no input transform means, and I'm moving into the Academy Density Exchange color space, which is a very good space to tee up for Kodak 2383. ADX19, that ain't right. Okay, now we're going to go to our film looks here. And I'm going to grab, I really like the Kodak 2383 D60 in 709. So that's going to be this one, okay? Like so. So that's a nice image. That looks really good. My friend Walter Volpato is someone who I hear talk about this all the time. He's like, dude, you can get a great image out of 2383. So those are my two for you guys. Commonly overlooked or sort of dismissed tools that you can do a lot with, especially if you're maybe thinking about them a little bit differently. Noise reduction for kind of cleaning up skin texture, and then good old Kodak 2383 for film emulation. I'll put it to you guys this way. I'm just going to level with you. If you're not ready to grab Genesis, if you don't want to go grab it even at its indie level, it's just not the right time or the right fit for you, use this 2383. Don't spend money on other plugins. This can get you most of what you're going to find out there unless you're talking about Genesis. So give that a play. And especially using this ADX10 setup, you're going to get some very nice results right out the box.
A few questions about color management. Let's go and talk about the OOTF stuff. Can you explain what an OOTF is? And the question also is, why is OOTFs only available? Why is that only a thing in Resolve Color Management? Why isn't that not a thing in ACES, in JP 2499, OpenDRT? Why is that exclusive to Resolve Color Management?
Great question. Yeah, this is going to be a really fun one to explore. So what is this crazy OOTF thing? I mean, look, a great example. I'm in OpenDRT right now. I don't see that OOTF thing. To get it, we got to go into Resolve Color Management and look at a CST. So what is this thing? Has everyone seen this before? I'm going to turn it off and then on. I mean, it's not subtle. It's doing a lot to the image, right? So OOTF. Here's the reason why you don't see OOTF in most of these other places. Because it doesn't exist. It is a concept that I feel like is much easier. If you just removed the entire premise of an OOTF from everyone's horizon, from everyone's radar, we would all be better off without it. It's just another name for something you could do elsewhere. Let me show you what I mean. So like apply forward OOTF. Here's a much more sensible, more intuitive term than OOTF. OOTF, by the way, stands for opto-optical transfer function. You might have heard of electro-optical transfer functions or optoelectrical transfer functions, but opto-opto literally means like, okay, opto on one side, that's the scene that someone had to look at some point to say, yeah, roll on that, right? Opto on the other side, that's the display that this image somehow, some kind of way has to find its way onto. Okay. So what does opto-optical transfer function means? It means in addition to all the other stuff that we're doing in between, one other thing that we're doing in between. Does that sound sort of untidy and sloppy? It is. It's really unnecessary because why wouldn't you just incorporate that stuff that's happening in between the original scene and the final display? Why wouldn't you incorporate that into your pipeline in a different way than just a checkbox like a fistful of salt that you're throwing onto the dish at the very end? Okay. So the reason it doesn't exist in other systems is like it's doing something like if we turn this off, we're like, well, that doesn't look right. So we tend to turn it on, right? Anybody out there like to turn this off because you feel like it gives you a better baseline? Again, I can't wait to hear you guys all put your hands up or down or shake your head or whatever, but I'm going to assume that's a big loud no, right? Like we don't typically like to have this off because it looks weird. So the thing is, the reason it doesn't exist in OpenDRT or 2499 or ACES or these other systems is, remember, you guys have heard me use this expression before. God is a curve. We can understand everything about what we do in color grading as a curve, okay? As some kind of curve. We already looked at that today when we were looking at the way to shape out our shadows, right? I was encouraging you to use your custom curves because you can look at things as a curve in that point, okay? So if we look at what's happening here, like what's the biggest task of this node right now, of this or any other DRT? It is to tone map. It is to put the dynamic range of the scene and put the dynamic range of the scene onto our display. So if we look at our waveform here, this is the net curve of that operation. And that's what I want you guys to pay attention to, okay? So there's our net curve. Let's turn that off and let's go ahead and go back to OpenDRT. Let me get our fresh node going here and throw this on. Now, we've done lots of deep diving in recent videos about how OpenDRT and Resolve Color Management or CSTs, they're very different systems, right? But check this out. Look at what's sometimes called the tone scale. It's very similar, right? Like they're not that far out at all. You're going to find this like with any viewing LUT or DRT, they're going to have the same basic character. Like they can vary a lot, but they're going to have an increase in contrast in the middle and they're going to have some kind of roll in the top and the bottom, right? So what's the difference? How come OpenDRT manages to get this and have it look similar to that, even though it doesn't have an OOTF? That's just because the concept of the OOTF, which is really just a little bit of a drop in contrast, or rather a drop in middle gray and a little bit extra contrast, it's just baked into what that curve is doing. So there's a million different ways that you could design this curve in terms of the math, but the reason why we don't see OOTF in most systems is they're not adding that secondary adjustment on top of their output curve. It's just in the output curve and in the parameters of the output curve that say, hey, take an input of blah, 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 0.336 Da Vinci Intermediate and make sure that it maps to a 0.39 or a 0.37 or whatever it is in display space. Like there's all these parameters and constraints to any of these curves. So they're doing the same thing effectively. The OOTF just happens, in my opinion, to be a very clunky way of doing it, where it's like, oh yes, we will do our thing and then we will add another thing to help that thing that should have been able to do the thing all on its own. You guys picking up what I'm putting down? It's just a way of getting there. It's fine. Like if I thought Resolve CSTs looked way more beautiful than OpenDRT or 2499, then I probably wouldn't be coming down as hard on the OOTF things. I'd be going, well, this DRT may use a clunky way of achieving a reasonable level of base contrast, but it's so beautiful, I don't care. So it's really doesn't matter. But I think in terms of purity or cleanliness or like smallest number of steps possible, it's much better to just say like, I will have a curve function in my DRT that maps me onto my display in a pleasing way without having that. And then this other thing that we have to add on top before the curve function even works. Like if we go back to our Resolve CST scenario for a second here, like look at the OOTF if I turn this off. That curve function looks totally whack, right? So like basically this curve function doesn't work until you add this second step onto the curve function that's already been completed. I could go on, but you guys get the idea. Hope that helps.
One question here about reducing the sharpness of modern lenses and sensors. Specifically, he's talking about using Genesis and some other kind of film emulation. But do you have any approach for reducing the sharpness of lenses and sensors, specifically for film emulation?
I do. So I will tell you, for anybody who did grab a license of Genesis last week, by the way, put a hand up in the chat. Let me know. Who's a Genesis license holder? Who's partying? Who is going to come to our workshop this coming weekend with me, Dr. Mitch Bogdanowicz, and Steve Yield and ASC? Let me know. I want to know. Am I going to be alone in there? Am I going to show up and be like, oh, I guess nobody cared? But this is top of mind for me. And by the way, something that's going to be coming in near-term releases of Genesis is a bit more of textural behavior, specifically to accompany the grain and the halation textural elements that are already in the plugin. But I'm going to show you guys one thing that works really well. So again, remember, in my template node graph, I'm going to be mindful, because I'm about to do a textury thing, not to do it in a parallel stack, because you can get weird results when you do textural spatial things in a parallel stack. Let's go to node number 10. This is a variation on something we already did today. I'm going to right click, gamma, linear, and we're going to go in and increase our blur. This is real simple, guys. The biggest challenge of this workflow is that it's quite touchy, but like, I've seen way, way worse ways of doing this. Like, this is a pretty functional way of just softening things out a little bit. If you find the right level of it, like, that's not going to transmit over YouTube, so I'll click it up a bit. But like something like that does its job really nicely. Might sound overly simplistic, and like, I know it's not a cool new 10-stage DCTL or anything like that, but like, my question, the challenge that I would give to you guys that I think comes up a lot when we're talking about MTF or like softening for the sharpness of modern lenses, I think it's often a scenario where we have solutions without problems, where like, I'm not saying this is not a valid area to explore. It totally is. But until you have an actual problem where you're like, yes, there's ringing up in that high end, or like, I can see like those individual strands of hair feel very digitally and problematic. Until you have a specific problem you're trying to solve, you're not going to know when you found the solution, which is, I think, why we have so many like conversations surrounding this stuff out there right now, and these like crazy like stacked node trees that I see people doing. That, like, in fairness, they may have what I'm talking about. They may have like their exact pain point. They're like, I had this pain point and I solved it with that. And if so, like, totally more power to them. I don't mean to disparage solutions that work. But for me, it usually starts with like, all right, what is actually bothering you? Is there something bothering you? That's the same question that I ask my clients when I'm in the room. Like, help me understand like what specifically is bugging you, other than this just kind of like what's become a sort of generic talking point of like, oh yes, the sharpness of modern digital lenses that you have to take the edge off of if you want to get anything filmic. Like, I'm not going to say that's either true or false, but it's not like obviously true in all cases. Okay. So once you have a more specific problem that you're trying to solve, you'll have a more success doing so. But for me, like, my go-to is just a little bit of blur and linear. Like, that can really, really help with getting that feeling into the image. Hope that's at least it. If nothing else, maybe you guys keep continuing with pursuing more complex, fancy solutions, but I hope I can at least give you permission not to skip over this completely. Like, if you can pull this off and it works, that's okay. The color grading police will not come and arrest you, I promise.
Question about contrast. Quantum Images is saying that he struggles with having a decent level of contrast, but also preserving or not ruining the dynamic range of the image. Essentially, he tries to either preserve all the dynamic range and also avoid getting to a very flat image. So essentially, how to optimize your contrast while preserving dynamic range?
Oh man, this is a great question. Yeah, how do we optimize contrast while preserving dynamic range? So I'm going to give you guys the real answer. You ready for this? You can't be done. Like, I'm going to go even further with you guys. I'm going to say this. The inherent process of printing an image, and when I say printing an image, I just mean making an image visible and suitable for viewing on a screen. That process, you could, it's a pretty functional definition to say like, well, what is that? What are you really doing when you do that? You are destroying dynamic range. That's the job. That's fundamentally the job being done. Are there better and worse ways to do that? For sure. Are there ways that are more traditional and yield a feeling of range and depth? Absolutely. But I think it's something that I know I got confused about a lot earlier in my career, that I was like really trying to look, wait, I just feel like there's always like, I'll put it to you guys this way. Here's another answer to your question, like, or another answer to the, no, you didn't exactly ask this question, but like, what if I'm trying to preserve all the dynamic range that I possibly can? That's my number one goal, because I've heard that question a lot too. Some of you guys know where I'm going with this, right? Just leave it in log. Like, check this out. I can get a lot of steps in here, right? I can get like, I don't know about you guys over YouTube right now, but I can pretty well distinguish 18 steps right now. I can see the vertical lines separating each of these stops, right? What's going to happen when I apply my output transform? It's not going to be true anymore. I'm destroying dynamic range, especially in the top and in the bottom. That's just the gig. That's just the job. So you don't need to be afraid of that. I feel like who was I hearing talk about this most recently? Oh, Yvonne Lucas, who you guys know I love, one of my favorite colorists, one of the most accomplished colorists in the world. He's a colorist at Company 3 and color graded all kinds of beautiful movies, some of my favorite films. But he talks about that. I think he talked about it for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where he's like, yeah, there's this kind of like allergy to contrast that we seem to have in color grading right now. Where he's like, you just got to like lean into it and let the contrast do its job, including to diminish distinguishing, to diminish like gradation or distinguishment. That's not exactly a word, but you know what I mean, between steps that were discernible before, to like remove discernibility between steps that you could discern previously. And here's the thing, guys, this is not just like unnecessary evil. Like, oh man, I wish that wasn't the case, but I just don't have a better answer for you guys. That's all you can do. This is actually part of what makes images work, because which of these images is easier to, like, this is such an abstract exercise, but I'm going to try to hold you guys to it for a minute. Like, just looking at these steps of gray, which of these is a more digestible image? It's number 2, right? Like, there's variation here, and then I've got rich shadows that feel like I could pull something out of there if I wanted to, highlights that feel bright and have some amount of separation as I move into them, but there's less for me to read. Things don't feel as like separated out. You guys have heard me talk about this before too, but like we talk so much about like different kinds of colors, different kinds of separation in color grading and how separation is so desirable. Separation is not always desirable, actually. Sometimes what you need is the word I always come back to that I've got to come up with a shorter word for is homogenization. Like, I don't actually want to see every single individual grayscale step here. I actually want these things to clump together into the bottom, the middle, and the top. I want these sort of like areas of the image where these different parts of it live. So that would be kind of how I would think about that, is don't necessarily be afraid of letting contrast take away a certain amount of dynamic range. It's just going to, and that's not only okay, that's actually part of what makes images beautiful. Here's another good way to look at it. Go back and look at other disciplines outside of movies, especially go look at disciplines outside of movies, visual disciplines, and go further back than a couple decades. Like, look at paintings, look at pictures, look at sketches and drawings, and look at the way they create the feeling of dynamic range while having very little dynamic range within there. Like, go find me a painting where you can discern more than 5 to 6 stops of dynamic range, like individual gradated steps. It would be hard to do. I'm sure it's out there, but like, that's generally not the way we absorb a painting, for example, even like really good paintings. And again, that's not incidental. That's actually part of what makes those paintings so captivating, is because they sort of like invite an idea of lots of dynamic range, but they're not bogging down our brain with lots of individual details to pick apart and process. Went on kind of a tangent there, but I hope that's some helpful ideas for you about contrast and dynamic range. Go with it.
Thatcher is here, and I think this is a joke, but I also think that this makes a very fun question. And essentially, he wants to know what crimes are severe enough for the color grading police to arrest me.
Oh, that is a good question. Man, I'd have to think about that one. I mean, this would be a great question for all of us to inventory. I'd be curious to hear Thatcher and everybody else's answer. But I feel like the crimes that are severe enough are number one is just producing an image that's not in alignment with your goals, right? That's severe enough. Like I if there were a color grading police and I could drop a dime on you for that, I would, because that ain't right. That's your one most like non-negotiable job, is you got to make it look more like what you or your collaborators want than it started. So if you break that rule, you should be in color grading jail for sure. Give me some other guys. Like, think about this with me. I don't want to be all alone up here brainstorming with these, but that's the first one that comes up. The other one that comes to mind would be, like, I talked about this in ResolveCon on Friday. Was anybody at my talk in ResolveCon, or did you guys show up for the rest of ResolveCon on Friday? That was a great show. Let me know in the chat. Where is the chat? I want to see what's going on in there. I never get to hang out in the chat. Yeah. So, ResolveCon, good talk in there. But we talked about this in ResolveCon on Friday, that, like, I've never once in all of my years of color grading seen someone who's like, you're going to love this. Come here, let me show you my room. Okay, I've got this mini panel right here. But sometimes I like to use the gamma wheel on this micro panel. So I keep that handy over here. I've never met that person, not once, right? But many of us are doing that in our color grading practice, right? We're like, oh, well, like, sometimes I feel like controlling my middle with this. And then sometimes I like to go over into my log controls and do a little bit of that. Or sometimes I'll do some lift and gain, but then if I feel like it's not quite there, I'll round it out with some contrast pivot. You guys know what I'm talking about? How many of you have ever been guilty of something like this? I know I have. That's another crime I would have the color grading police come and arrest you for. Like, dude, one tool for one job. It doesn't even have to be the perfect tool. I hope your tool selection gets better and better as you're going forward, but you should do one tool for one job. Otherwise, there's not even an opportunity to identify that you might need a better tool, because you're just kind of bouncing around in between things. So those are my two maybe immutable laws of the color grading police. There's probably, I feel like I like threes. There's probably a third one that I could come up with somewhere in there, but that's a good start to it anyway. And yeah, if that was a joke, it still led to a good conversation, Thatcher.
My favorite one is adding noise reduction after your grain. That might be it.
Oh, yeah. If we're getting detailed, thank you, Rolf. That's a good one. Adding noise reduction after your grain is a pretty tough one to come back from. That is pretty ill-advisable for sure.
All right. Let's jump to another question, and let's talk about your current workflow. Can you go over your node tree or some of the new stuff that you've been doing recently?
Yeah, sure. So current workflow. This is something that we're going to be talking about a lot here on the channel. Get that little, oh, it's my log wheels. Get those out of here. We'll be talking about this a lot in the next couple of weeks here on the channel. Let's get some kind of look going on in here. Maybe I want to do, I'm just pulling a look into contour over here. Now, let's talk about node tree. So I kind of want to like spill some tea with you guys. Is everybody ready? Where are my CCA people at? Do I have any CCA alums in the house? I know I do. Shooting on 16 mil to test neat video. Yeah, that's pretty bad, Ralph. Yeah, CCA alums, you guys are going to know about this already. But I'm just going to spill the secret to you. Part of the secret to you guys anyway. I've been lying to you guys here on YouTube a little bit. You want to know what I've been lying to you about? This node tree. It's not a full-on lie. Like, this node tree is sound, and it's a great place to start, which is why I talk about it on the channel. It's why when you go to download my node tree power grade, it's what you're going to get. Because I do think it is a simple, repeatable, very good sort of baseline foundation to begin color grading with. However, it's not what I grade with. It's similar, but it's quite distinct from what I grade with. And something that is top of mind for me for the rest of the year is I want to try to close that gap a little bit and give you guys like the power and the flexibility that I enjoy in my grading practice while trying to avoid clicking up the complexity too much. So to be honest, I'm still not 100% sure how we're going to do that, but let's take a little bit of a sneak peek at it today. So we're going to take a look at my Pro tree. This is way, way closer to what I actually grade with. Now, the node tree itself is identical. And the reason I asked about my CCA peeps and who's in the house today is because I'm going to show you guys some tools that right now, I'm going to tease you a little bit. If you have not taken the Colorist Career Accelerator, you will not have access to these tools. That's something that I want to give y'all these tools, or an equivalent, y'all being the wider YouTube community, at some point in the near future, because I really do believe that having a better primary adjustment tool, for example, in this first node, is really impactful on your grade, because literally every shot you grade is going to be affected by it. But to answer like the original question, what are you doing in your node tree? And then like, what are the actual things that are changing right now or that have recently changed? This is going to be a pretty good kind of up-to-date primer there. So I've got this base prime tool here. Okay. So base prime, it's pretty simple. I'm also going to try to give you guys notes along the way of like, all right, how would you do this if you didn't have any of these tools available, which is going to be the case for most of you guys in this room. So with this tool, I've got my exposure. It is exactly the same as your HDR global wheel. Okay. So if you didn't have it, you could go there. The fun part for me is that I've got HDR global wheel, photometric exposure, and right within reach in the same spot, I've got normal traditional contrast. That's the kind I like, not the kind of contrast that we get here in the HDR palette, which I really don't care for. I've got my contrast pivot. Pivot is already set at the default mid-gray for my system. What does that mean for anybody who doesn't already know? If I go back to my DaVinci Wide Gamut Gray patch that we were looking at earlier, not like that. There we go. If I go back here, I can slam this contrast as much as I want. This will never move, right? Because I'm pivoting around mid-gray. So that's an important feature for me that you can totally get with Resolve natively. All you got to do here in your primaries is set your pivot, which defaults elsewhere, set it to 0.336, and then save that as a power grade. Okay. So you've kind of got a way to recreate that as well. We've got the pivot. The thing that you don't have in Resolve that I feel like I rely on all the time is my roll off and my roll strength. Okay. So if we plot this curve and we just say like, let's go like a little more open and then a little more contrast. Look at my halation triggering from Genesis right now. It's kind of funny. So I've got my contrast right here. And right now my roll off is defaulted to 0.5, which is a pretty good spot, honestly. What you have in Resolve in terms of your options for the type of contrast pivot curve that you create, you have two options. You can have this, or you can have that. You guys know what I'm talking about? That gets controlled here in your project settings, general options, use S-curve for contrast. So you can have one or you can have the other, and it must stay the same for every single shot in the project. Whereas with this base prime tool, you can have one, you can have the other, you can have anything in between, and you can change it with every shot if you want to. So that's another helpful degree of freedom there. You can even shape out like the amount of compression, like how hard that roll hits in the bottom and the top of the image. Okay. And then we've got preserve color, which is very similar to using your Y controls inside of Resolve, like your Y bars over here. Okay. So that's much closer to what I currently use for making primary tonal adjustments in Resolve. I do not use Resolve native tools to make primary tonal adjustments. If you guys were in the room with me, you might make fun of me because I've got that big grand looking control surface and I'm usually working the knobs at the very top and I very rarely touch the 4 largest track balls on the instrument, but that's what gets me the results that I want. So we got something like that here for our base prime. The balance node, that actually is straight up the same exact thing that we've been talking about here on YouTube for a while. That's just working the gain trackball in linear. So my gamma is set to linear. I'm just working my gain trackball within that, okay? Let's get to a fresh image. I'm tired of this one. So if we go next node, and I needed to cool this off, I would do it like so, okay? And let's actually do this. Let me load up this tree on this image. And we'll maybe go a little more open. I'm just going to kind of grade with you guys for a second here. Is that cool? And then we'll go roll off like so and bring that down. And now we'll go to our balance node. And I'm just going to move that trackball I want you guys to be able to see the bullseye itself, if that's helpful. And we'll just move that trackball, something like that, okay? And then lastly, let's look at this SAT tool. Again, the structure, the setup is the same. So like if you go and download my node tree power grade, the template node tree power grade, I think we'll have a link to that in the description for the show today as well. If not, I'll go back and add it as soon as I can. If you go and download that, you're going to see the same structure. I'm just using a few slightly modified or enhanced tools to get the job done. So with the saturation node here, which by the way, you don't have to do this on every shot. I only reach for this if I really need to. But this is just a really simple way of getting gamma and gain in an HSV-like space, okay? So if you were to do this like so and work your gamma and gain here, this is the exact same thing as if you were doing this. Set your color space to HSV. Set your channels to channel 1, or rather to channel 2 only, like so. And now I can control saturation in this image with my gamma and my gain. For this, it might be easier to go to a different image. I'm going to reset this balance on this one. We'll reset the whole thing, actually. We don't need that exposure or that contrast change. Something more like that. And then if we go over here, so I'm now working my gamma and my gain to change my saturation, okay? So I'm getting the exact same thing right now in this saturation node, okay? But if I start to pull this slider, spherical versus subtractive, back to the left, I'm going to get different results. I'm going to get a different model that's not quite as aggressively subtractive. Still looks nice, but it's got a different model to it. By the way, this spherical model, this is the same model that is used in the color slice tool in Resolve, but you've got the ability to control gamma and gain independently. So kind of like the middle or the belly or the bottom of your saturation curve versus the top, which is what gain does, okay? So again, variations, elevations, upgrades from the base node tree, but this is much closer to what I'm actually grading with in my professional practice. And then from here, it is the same. Like other color grading stuff that doesn't require power windows happens here. Generally, anything that requires a power window is going to happen there. These two nodes right now are set to be outside nodes so that they can basically function as vignettes. So, you know, if I wanted to shape this out, like by default, I'm already working the outside of it. If you look at the window itself, it's already flipped around. And if I turn out not to need that when I'm grading, I flip it back around. But I'm usually 90% of my windows are circular, and they're also outside nodes, generally speaking. Because if I want to turn this into whatever, just like a straight up grad, you know, I can do that as well, just by moving things around and softening out like wherever I want to see that happen. Okay, so that's what's going on there with like power windows and stuff. And that's about it, guys. Oh, the trim. I want to show you that, guys, this too. Again, right now, zero intention of teasing you guys, more just want to like level with you about the stuff that is indispensable to me that I do want to offer to y'all in some form in the near future on YouTube, whether or not you've had the chance to take my Colors Career Accelerator course with me. This trim node is super clutch for me because it literally just allows, like, let's look at this previous frame. This will be a good one. We can kill this power window. This trim node is a great way to just bring in bright stuff in a focused but a gentle way. So I can pull this in like so. And really what I'm trying to do when I use this, by the way, all this stuff, it's all just about the curve. And so what I'm trying to do when I do this is bring it in and make my length of my curve segment be as long as possible without touching parts of the image that I don't want to touch. So it's going to be nice and gentle as I can make it without touching the areas that I don't want to. So something like that. You can see that's having a very nice, like, localized effect, right? Like, that's way too strong. I wouldn't necessarily go that heavy with it, but you can see it's almost having like a qualifier-like effect, but it's just one channel and it's very clean, right? So that's the other piece for me. That I've actually got living in another form in my prime node as well. So that's something I would hope to kind of like retool here in this tool on this side. But this is also, as the name implies, I use this a ton when I'm trimming, when I'm HDR trimming, just as a way of saying like, hey, dude, the grade is fine. Like I just need to shape in the highlights a little bit now that we have that extra little bit of headroom up there, or whatever it is. It's a trim. It's like, hey, the rest of the grade is ready to go. I literally just want to trim the bottom and the top to get a little bit more, of a little bit more tucked in or shaped out or whatever it is in the bottom of the top of the image. I can do this in the top like I'm doing right now, or I can do it in the bottom by going to low. And now you can see I'm doing that instead. This also works both directions. So if I've got like something with a lens flare or something, I can get the equivalent of lift, but narrow the effect so that it's only affecting the very bottom or area of the image that I want to see change. What do you guys think of that? Is that cool? That's like the latest in terms of like how I'm flowing through my node graph in general, and then the specific tools that I'm using to do so. And actually do let me know if you're here live right now in the present moment. Let me know in the chat if any of that looks interesting or cool, if you feel like you would use it. Let me know in the comments if you're watching this recording, does any of that look cool? Or you're like, dude, I'm done. I'm DCTL'd out. Like, just let me do something. Let me work with what I got. Let me know. That's helpful to hear. All right, what else we got?
We have a few questions about ACEs, and we have this one. The first one is if you have any reason to use ACEs these days over something like DaVinci Wide Gamut as your working space. Also, how to use an ACEs pipeline while using something like OpenDRT or JP2499. And also a question about that they feel that rolling the highlights in ACEs feels way easier than doing that in DaVinci Intermediate. Is there any reason for that?
Ooh, we're going to have like an ACEs party for the next couple of minutes here. This is great. Great questions. All right. So let's start with like, am I using ACEs? Do I see any reason to use ACEs in my current practice? For me, that's a no. But I will say like using ACEs, like I always feel like I'm when I respond to questions like this, I'm giving you more than you bargained for. But here's the thing, using ACEs, that term really doesn't mean anything. Like what most of us mean when we say using ACEs is using ACEs as well as the DRT that ACEs prescribes. Okay. Everybody remember what a DRT is? Have you guys been tuning in and checking out the content that we've been doing on DRTs this year? DRT, device render, display rendering transform specifically, or what's sometimes called your ODT or just your display transform, all different terms for the same thing that I'm referring to right now. It's the thing that makes your image visible. It's the thing that puts your image on the screen. So most of the time people will confuse ACEs with the ACEs working space, mapping into the ACEs working space from a particular input space, and pathing the final image out to display using the ACEs ODT. But those are all completely different things that have nothing to do with each other. Like, you can do all those things at once, but that's the same as saying like, like all automobile drivers must wear blue t-shirts. Like, oh, if you're talking about driving an automobile, you're obviously wearing a blue t-shirt. They're just not related really at all. Like there's no rule that says you can't do that. And many people are fans of driving automobiles with blue t-shirts apparently, but they have nothing to do inherently with each other. Okay. So let's think about ACEs like in terms of the actual pieces and what it really means. Like if you're like, all right, I have a studio who says you got to work in ACEs, or a client who says you got to work in ACEs. And by the way, like we can talk about those kinds of conversations another time. That's a battle I've had to fight more than once because the same misunderstanding that I just described like persists up and down all areas of our industry. And that's in one of them. We're like, so what do you mean when you say that? Do you mean you want your archival elements in ACEs? That prescribes literally nothing about my process except my deliverables. I can deliver you whatever you want. Anyway, I'm going on a tangent there. But point being, like, I would choose ACEs or DaVinci Wide Gamut or Arealog C3, like whatever your working space is. I would choose it more on the basis of another question that we had come in of like, well, I kind of like how highlights feel easier to manipulate in ACEs than they do in DaVinci Wide Gamut. I would choose it more on the way that working in that space feels. Because like, put it to you this way. What if I wanted to get this exact same image right now? Like, let's go here just because it's a little bit easier to look at. I'm going to reset everything here. So all we're looking at is the pipes right now. And my pipes right now are DaVinci Wide Gamut Intermediate. And I'm using Contour and Genesis. Let's go even simpler, okay? Let's go back to what I started with here today. where we're going to do, is this where I was? No, sorry. There we go. We've got contour and open DRT. Okay. This is my pipeline. Now, I can get this exact same result using ACES if I want to. I can map into ACES CCT. And I can go over here and choose ACES CCT as my working space. And I actually don't remember. I was assuming I can do this in OpenDRT, which I can. ACES CG, ACES CCT. Okay. Now, like, look, there's some forensic differences in the vector scope, like things that might matter to you. And like, if you're talking about selecting based on, you know, wanting to get like slightly wider gamut coverage, for example, like that might be a thing. But like, just like, look generally with me, like we're getting to the same place, right? So there's really not a huge meal to be made out of selecting one over the other. Although we're seeing that ACES does have a slightly smaller primary set than DaVinci Wide Gamut Intermediate, and some of that is having a net effect on the image, but it's pretty forensic. Like this is, generally speaking, these are quite similar images, right? So I would choose like, so saying I want to work in ACES or I want to work in DaVinci Wide Gamut for any kind of aesthetic reason, maybe you're talking about these specific edge cases, but like the body of the image is going to be the same in both cases, right? So if you're not talking about that, then the choice really comes down to how do the controls feel in your hand, as you called out. Now let's try to answer that question of like, all right, is there any reason why highlights would feel different in ACES than they would in DaVinci Wide Gamut? Let's just do a quick comparison of something. Let's look at what happens if we do our gain to a 0.7, or let's even go, gain is a good. I'm just going to do some combination where I'm going to try to like, just with my primaries, really try to like rein in my highlights. Okay. So something like that. I'm going to go sort of extreme just for the sake of like having a very strong thing to respond to. A little bit more if we can. So something like that. Okay. I'm really pulling in my highlights, but trying to keep my middle somewhere close to where it was. This, by the way, is a good example of why having more targeting tools can be helpful. But like, let's just say this is a thing. Okay. So this is this random set of primaries adjustments that I've made, or arbitrary set of primaries adjustments that we've made in ACES. Let's leave this adjustment exactly the same. Let's leave our pipeline that a moment ago was giving us the exact same result, or rather flip that pipeline back to DaVinci Wide Gamut. Okay. Like so. And like so. So now we are going to see, I can tell you before we even look at it, we're going to see a larger difference. These tools respond differently. So what do we see? We're getting a stronger effect when we use some combination of lift, gamma, gain to try to roll highlights in. We're getting a stronger response in our hands in ACES CCT than we are getting in DaVinci Wide Gamut Intermediate. I will have to hit these adjustments harder to match to what I was getting over here. You guys tracking with me? You see what I'm pointing out here? So what does that mean? Like I've got those now kind of eyeballed back to a somewhat similar position, right? So what does that mean in terms of your observation that highlights feel easier to adjust in ACES CCT? It might just be, and this, by the way, tracks with the kind of geeky color science of the ACES CCT curve. It could just be that ACES CCT is more responsive in the top end. So it feels like you're doing more quickly. And maybe that can feel like, okay, cool, I grabbed it. It's doing a thing and you're not having to hit stuff as hard. That might be the answer right there. In terms of like whether you're able to actually do something faster or better in one versus the other, that's really for you to decide. And I think that is the key decision of working space. What is my working space? Is it large enough to encompass any colors that might need to come into it? By the way, again, just to go back to it, like that's not quite true of ACES CCT, which is why when we were seeing differences, that's why we were seeing them in the final image. So is it large enough to encompass all colors that might come through it? And how are the tones distributed in the log curve so that like adjusting shadows, midtones, highlights feels really good. This is a great place to round out the conversation today, and I feel like I at least touched on the other ACES questions. So I'm going to go a step further with this. Let's try this. We're going to grade in the worst color grading space of all time. Everybody ready? We're going to grade in log C4. Why do I say log C4 is the worst color grading space of all time? Can I even do that in Contour? Probably not. No. I say it's the worst color grading space of all time because of where it maps things, as I was just describing. So let's do this. We're going to say, flip me into DaVinci Wide Gamut, and then flip me back out to log C4. So I've got kind of a sandwich here where I'm doing my contour stuff, and then here in OpenDRT, we're going to do log C4. Okay? So again, if we just look at our baseline, let's reset this. Let's see. I didn't save quite the right state of image. You guys are going to have to take my word for it that what we're looking at right now is fundamentally the same as what we were seeing when we rendered this, when we selected ACES or DaVinci Wide Gamut as our working space, okay? But what is not different, or what is not the same, is the way my controls are going to feel in my hands. The mid-gray with log C4 is comically low. What's that going to mean? It's just going to mean stuff's going to feel weird. Like gamma is really no longer going to feel like the middle. And the highlights are going to have an even more like drastically different response than we were seeing between like ACES and DaVinci Wide Gamut. Okay. So there's going to be differences in all these spaces. They're all going to be like, most are going to be kind of close. Like log C4 is definitely the biggest outlier, but that's kind of how I would think about that is like, you want to choose ACES or DaVinci Wide Gamut based on how the controls feel in your hands and based on what your tools and your LUTs are set up to work within, more so than some external prescription, because you can always like, if I needed to deliver this in DaVinci Wide Gamut to a VFX vendor, I could do that. Of course, I can deliver any target color space that I want to. Like you can move in between spaces freely. What matters most is how it feels and how it operates for you when you're the one who actually has to do the color grading. Okay, there was like a bunch of ACES questions in there. I hope I touched on most of them, and I hope that was a fun bonus talking about why log C4 is everyone's least favorite color space. I think ARI even mentions that in their documentation from when log C4 first came out. But anyway, guys, great session. Good to see you all today. Let me close out on my resolve so I can say farewell. Thank you guys very much for being here with me today. I love doing grade school with y'all. What a great way to start the week off. Thanks to my buddy Ruff for hanging out with me. Thanks to all of my CCA alums and core community members for hanging out. And thanks to everybody who's watching this recording later and hanging out for the first time. We're glad to have you here as well. This is the best color grading community on the internet. So thank you all very much. Have a great rest of your week, and I will see you here on the channel super soon.